people's political or religious speech. People don't need to be talking about politics or religion out in public. You know, yeah, print, birth date, and a signature. There's a time and a place to talk about politics and religion, and it's not out in public. It's what your living room is for, and a signature to support banning talking about politics and religion out in public. Thank you so much for helping out.
All right, okay, that's Mark Dice's latest man on the street video, and if you notice from that, actually one of the people who signs the video is an older man whose father probably fought in the Second World War to defend the very freedoms that we have to express our political and religious views. Absolutely shocking. We'll be back with more news after the break. This is the Alex Jones Show live.
My name is Bill Bonner.
We're back live on the Alex Jones Show this September 30th, 2015 edition. I'm your host, Paul Joseph Watson. We've got a couple of guests coming up over the next 2 hours, which will be really fascinating. We're going to take your calls as well for those guests. Before the break, we played Mark Dice's video again. Liberals signing a petition to ban the discussion of politics and religion in public. And I guess that is a real solid solution for the hate speech being spewed by the likes of Ben Carson and Donald Trump because they dare to criticize radical Islam. I mean, God forbid that they should have the temerity to do so. And again, they were savaged. They were absolutely savaged by the left-wing media over the past couple of weeks, simply for saying, in the case of Ben Carson, that the tenets of the Quran, if you actually read the passages, are incompatible with the US Constitution. So if you had a Muslim president that embraced those tenets, there would be a problem with them actually protecting the free speech rights of American citizens if they also believed in Sharia law. And on the subject of that, this headline, again, absolutely shocking. Muslim man admits strangling his daughter for dishonor after she was caught stealing condoms. This is out of BizPac Review. A Muslim immigrant, and this is in Germany, bearing in mind, this is in Germany where they're now importing hundreds of thousands of these Muslim migrants, supposedly Syrian refugees. Only 1/5 of them are actually Syrian. They're importing them en masse, and this is the kind of culture that they're now importing. A Muslim immigrant from Pakistan who strangled his daughter and hid her body in a forest told a courtroom he killed her because he was enraged that she'd been caught stealing condoms. That's worthy of the death penalty under Sharia law. Again, even if you entertain the notion that she was having sex with someone, you know, God forbid, there wasn't even any proof of that. She stole some condoms. According to the Australian news agency News.com, the murder took place in Darmstadt, Germany in January when 51-year-old Asadullah Khan killed 19-year-old daughter Larib Khan for bringing, quote, dishonor to her family with a man she'd been forbidden to date. And again, bearing in mind, in Pakistan, there are 1,000 honor killings per year, mostly of women. And in many cases, it's because they marry somebody to whom their parents don't consent them to marry. And in other cases, they look at a man twice. That is the death penalty sentence. Looking at a man twice requires an honor killing in some cases in Pakistan. 1,000 cases a year of this. Now these Muslim migrants are traveling to Germany, and this is the culture that they're importing. His wife, who was involved in this plot, Shazia Khan, told the German court she helped her husband hide the woman's body because she was afraid of him. The family had been arguing about Larib Khan's boyfriend, the news agency reported, and Asadullah Khan had attempted to strangle his daughter once before. So this wasn't the first time. And basically they got a letter from the police saying that there was some evidence that this girl had stole some condoms. They then took that as evidence that she was having sex with someone else without their permission. The husband burst into her bedroom immediately upon finding this out and strangled her to death. And where were the feminists with their outrage about the patriarchy and about the oppression of women? Bearing in mind, this is in Europe. This is not even in the Middle East. This is in Europe. They were absolutely nowhere to be seen. They're too busy whining to the UN about how mean tweets need to be censored, and the entirety of the social media networks, Facebook, Twitter, need to be controlled by the UN or by governments that follow UN mandates, because you can't say a feminist sucks, or you can't say they're a liar. That's true misogyny. Meanwhile, people in Europe, women, young women, teenagers, are getting strangled to death for, quote, stealing condoms. Now, which is the greater tragedy? Which is the greater issue in comparison? Mean tweets or getting strangled to death by men for stealing condoms? Yet the feminists don't talk about it. We'll be right back with our guest. This is The Alex Jones Show Live. Stay tuned. We're back live on The Alex Jones Show. I'm your host, Paul Joseph Watson. Now we've got our next guest coming up, and, you know, I've made videos about Sweden, and we tend to rag on Sweden, as it were. We tend to hate on Sweden because, again, it's the ultimate example of liberalism run rampant, liberalism gone mad. And I made a video probably 3-4 months ago now called Absolute Proof Liberalism is a Mental Disorder, talking about how some politicians in Sweden, and this is not official government policy yet, but this is what some of them are calling for, the political class, calling for giving ISIS militants, people who fought as terrorists in Syria, welfare and jobs when they return to Sweden. That's what some people in Sweden are actually calling for, and we're going to get into the rest of the madness. But somebody then recommended that I check out this guy's videos, who goes under the moniker The Angry Foreigner, and he put out a video called Welcome to Sweden, which went viral, which got, you know, upwards of 670,000 views. And then I checked out the rest of his video. This really is a great example of somebody who has seen the deception in terms of the fact that in Sweden it's basically almost a hate crime to even oppose mass immigration. And we're going to get into how people are publicly shamed and harassed and hounded simply for having a different opinion. So, The Angry Foreigner, welcome to the show. Now, before we get into the whole migrant issue, which is what 2 of your recent videos were about, just tell people about your background, because as far as I understand it, you're an immigrant yourself, correct?
Yeah, exactly. I came to Sweden when I was 5 years old in 1993. Me and my family fled the war in the Balkans. It was a very bloody, horrible conflict between Bosnian Muslims and Bosnian Serbs, Orthodox Serbs. So, yeah, we ended up here in a small town. I'm not even sure you can call it a town. Maybe it's more like a village. The population was only 1,000 people there. So it was basically me and a couple of other Bosnian families surrounded by Swedes. And it was, you know, it was great. It was the complete opposite of segregation. And I remember actually that my first day in school, I was terrified. I was freaking out because I was sitting there in the classroom and I didn't know a word of Swedish. So it was like being an alien visiting a foreign planet. And when you're little like that, social acceptance is very, very important. So I made sure to learn Swedish very fast and managed to learn it better than a lot of the students in my class, actually.
So you're an immigrant. You assimilated very quickly. You integrated. You learned the language. So you're there growing up in Sweden. Now you're making these videos critical of immigrants being brought into Sweden. And basically what people want to know, to outline this whole scenario, is, you know, in terms of this cult-like adherence to these leftist policies in Sweden, particularly as it relates to mass immigration, and the drowning out of voices of dissent against that. Because, you know, at least in Britain, we've got the Labour Party, we've got the left who always advocate mass immigration. You know, we voted the Conservatives into power to try and, you know, at least tamp down on that mass immigration to a certain extent. It didn't work. Mass immigration only increased. But at least we've got an acceptance of the fact that criticizing mass immigration is a social issue. It's an economic issue. And simply doing it doesn't automatically make you a racist. At least in many European countries, we still hold to that standard of political discourse. But it seems that in Sweden, even to question the policy of mass uncontrolled immigration is inherently racist and proves that you're a white supremacist or whatever. So what people want to know, as far as I'm concerned, is how bad is it in terms of people who express dissent against this mass immigration policy? How much are they frowned upon? How much are they shamed by the media, by the political class in Sweden?
It's sort of like blacks in the 50s, except nobody is getting lynched. I'm actually surprised that we don't have like diversity lovers only restaurants and toilets and, you know, bus seats, because it's bad. Like, it's ridiculous. And while that was a joke and exaggeration, there's a point to it. Like, you definitely have to think about what you say, because there is the risk of losing friends, and you might even lose your job. I mean, there's certain professions, like if you're a journalist or an academic or a teacher, especially a teacher, you can't criticize mass immigration or multiculturalism. You especially cannot say that the Sweden Democrats have a few valid points. That's like social suicide. But at the same time, we have like 58%, a poll showed that 58% of the population think that immigration is too large. So a large portion of the people are aware that there are problems with our immigration policy. But those people don't necessarily have the balls. So if you were to be vocal, like I've had so many people write me and tell me that they totally agree with what I'm saying, but they don't dare share my videos on Facebook. They don't dare be vocal and public about their opinions because they're afraid of social exclusion. And it's really interesting because there is a strong consensus culture here. And, you know, when we think of Orwellian societies where people aren't allowed to speak their minds, we usually think of the presence of a strong military force and like laws punishing people who say certain things. You don't need laws in Sweden because people censor themselves. There's a form of social control instead through taboos and norms. And I would say that the media is largely responsible for this because for years they have been beating in this, and the politician beating in this notion that immigration is good, immigration is going to serve us all, and you're racist if you think otherwise. So there's lots of people who have discovered my videos and said that, wow, I thought I was the only person who thought like this. And when you get like hundreds of people saying, I thought I was the only person, it becomes kind of ridiculous. It becomes obvious that so many people are living in some kind of bubble of fear. Like they're afraid to speak with their environment, with their surroundings about how they truly feel. So when they discover me, it's like this massive relief for them. And you know, that's pretty bad if you ask me. Also, there's people who genuinely think I'm a Nazi. Like, they seriously believe that I like Hitler. And just as you said, you can't, I mean, if you criticize the immigration policy, people immediately think that it's something personal with the immigrants. Obviously, that isn't the case because I'm an immigrant and I don't have a problem with immigrants. I have a problem with irresponsible immigration policy. And that's the one single word I would use to describe Sweden's immigration policy: irresponsible.
And you mentioned, you know, peer pressure. And this is what I've found, especially in Europe. I don't think Americans appreciate this to such an extent that they need to, is the fact that, you know, I assume that you're in your 20s or 30s. I'm in my 30s right now. So amongst people in your age group, it's not seen as trendy or kosher or acceptable. Again, as he said, it's seen as a taboo.